Your sickly sister drags you down. Crow. Samuel Holt sneers his words, slicing through the icy Montana morning as Wicasa, a crow guide, overhears from the shadows of the merchant's tent. Fury surges and Wicasa bursts in, shoving Holt to the ground with a sickening crack of bone as the man's arm breaks. Holt, eyes blazing, vows to call federal marshals to haul Wicasa and his frail sister Awee to jail unless he grovels publicly and flees the valley. Caught between saving Awee and clinging to his pride, Wicasa's heart pounds the weight of an impossible choice, threatening to crush him. Wicasa, a 34-year-old crow man with calloused hands and a haunted gaze, trudges through Montana's rugged trails in 1890, guiding white merchants to scrape together money for Awee's lung disease. Her coughs a constant reminder of her suffering in their factories. Scorned by his tribe for serving the enemy and reviled by the whites who hire him, he bears the sting of Awee's accusations that he's forsaken their heritage. Her words cut deeper than any outsider's insult, driving his longing to atone by preserving crow traditions. Yet he's trapped, forced to choose between enduring the merchant's cruelty to buy Awee's medicine or defying their oppression, a path that could cost them both their lives. The Montana dawn broke cold and gray in 1890, and Wicasa gripped the reins of his horse, leading a caravan of white merchants through the rugged valley. Their eyes, sharp with disdain, bored into him, each glance a reminder of his place as a crow man in their world. His thoughts drifted to Awee, his sister waiting in their tent, her coughs growing worse. Without medicine he could barely afford. One merchant, a wiry man with a sneer, muttered, "Bet this trader's selling his tribe's secrets." Wicasa's jaw tightened, but he swallowed his anger, his fingers curling around the worn leather reins. He halted the group to check a horse's hoof, hoping to dodge their taunts. Holt, the caravan leader, barked, "Move faster!" Crow. Wicasa stayed silent, his heart heavy with the truth. He needed this job to keep Awee alive, no matter the cost to his pride. Hidden behind Holt's tent, Wicasa froze as the merchant's voice cut through the morning chill. That sickly, savage Awee, she's a burden on her barbaric brother. Holt sneered to Logan. His assistant, Logan's laugh grated like gravel, and he added, "Why not get rid of them both?" Wicasa's blood boiled, his vision narrowing as Awee's frail face flashed in his mind, her coughs echoing in his ears. Holt's next words, mocking crow traditions, snapped something inside him. His fists clenched, nails biting into his palms, and he struggled to stay still, every fiber screaming to act. He couldn't bear it any longer. The insult to his sister was a wound too deep to ignore. Rage propelled Wicasa into the tent, his voice a growl. "Shut your mouth," Holt smirked, calling him a filthy savage, and Wicasa's control shattered. He shoved Holt hard, the man crashing into a table with a sickening crack as his arm broke. Logan lunged, knife gleaming, but Wicasa stepped back, fists raised ready to fight. Holt clutched his arm, his face twisted in pain and fury, spitting curses. Another merchant grabbed Logan, stopping a brawl, but the air crackled with tension. Wicasa's heart pounded, regret and defiance warring within him as he realized the trouble he'd unleashed. Holt staggered to his feet, his voice venomous. "I'll have the marshals drag you and your sister to jail," he demanded. Wicasa begged forgiveness before the caravan and leave the valley forever. If he refused, Awee would suffer too. Wicasa's mind raced, picturing Awee's fragile form behind bars, her coughs unanswered. Logan grinned, taunting, "You've got no choice, Crow." The weight of Holt's threat crushed Wicasa's chest, each word a chain binding him. He turned away, the tent flap slapping shut behind him, his steps heavy with dread, as he faced a future where every path led to loss. Back at his tent, Wicasa found Awee curled up, her coughs ragged in the dim light. He knelt beside her, voice shaking as he recounted the clash with Holt. Awee's eyes flashed with anger, and she snapped, "Why did you make things worse?" She accused him of shaming their people by working for whites. Wicasa tried to explain his words, stumbling, but Awee turned away. Her silence cutting deeper than her words, he felt utterly alone, the weight of her disappointment suffocating. As another cough racked her, he held her gently, his heart aching with the fear that he was failing her. Outside, under the starlit sky, Wicasa sat alone, the cold seeping into his bones. Memories of his father's teachings about Crow. Honor flooded back each one, a rebuke to the choice he faced. Begging Holt would save Awee, but strip him of dignity, branding him a coward in his tribe's eyes. Defying Holt could doom them both, marshals tearing Awee from their home. He clutched his mother's beaded necklace, its familiar weight grounding him. Would Awee forgive him if he bowed to Holt? A chill wind swept through, whispering of the impossible decision ahead. Leaving Wicasa staring into the dark, lost. Wicasa approached Holt the next morning, his voice steady despite the churn in his gut. "Give me time to think," he said, hoping to delay the inevitable. Holt scoffed, demanding an apology by dawn or face the consequences. Wicasa nodded, masking his plans to find another way. Back at the tent, he counted his coins, the meager pile mocking his efforts to buy Awee's medicine. He considered seeking allies among the Crow, someone to stand with him. As he stepped outside, a passing tribesman shot him a wary glance, a reminder of his isolation. Wicasa's resolve hardened. He would fight for Awee, no matter how alone he stood. At the village square, Wicasa's voice rang out pleading for help against Holt's threats. A young Crow jeered, "You serve the whites, traitor." An elder woman hissed that he'd shamed their people. Wicasa's throat tightened as he spoke of Awee's illness, but the crowd turned away their rejection, a cold blade in his chest. He stood alone in the dust, the weight of their scorn pressing down. No one would listen. Not to a man they saw as a betrayer. With a heavy heart, Wicasa vowed to find a way forward, his steps echoing his solitude as he left the square. Wicasa trudged to Hostian's tent, the old Crow elder's weathered face stern as he listened. Wicasa poured out his story, voice cracking, as he described Holt's ultimatum. Hostian's eyes narrowed, and he advised, "Apologize, boy, or you'll bring trouble on us all." He warned that the tribe distrusted anyone tied to whites, his words a wall between them. Wicasa begged for support, but Hostian shook his head, cautioning against dragging the Crow into danger. Leaving the tent, Wicasa felt the sting of rejection, his hope fading like smoke. The elder's doubt left him more alone, but he clung to his resolve to protect Awee. At a rundown inn near the valley, Wicasa found Laura, a white reporter, scribbling in a notebook. Her eyes widened as he shared his clash with Holt, his voice thick with desperation. Laura leaned forward, revealing she was investigating the merchant's shady deals. "Get me proof, and I'll help," she said, her words sparking a flicker of hope in Wicasa's chest. He nodded, though fear for Awee gnawed at him. Laura cautioned him about Logan's ruthlessness, her warning chilling his blood. As he left, Wicasa felt a fragile lifeline in Laura's offer, but the weight of his task pressed harder each step toward Holt's camp, a gamble with Awee's life. In the dim light of the inn, Laura pulled out a worn notebook, her fingers flipping to pages filled with notes on Samuel Holt. She leaned close to Wicasa, her voice low, saying Holt might be stealing Crow land. Wicasa's heart quickened, the idea of Holt's greed fueling his anger. Laura hinted at a secret source in the federal ranks, but shook her head when he pressed for a name. Her eyes cautious, she urged him to sneak into Holt's camp and find proof. Her words a spark in the fog of his despair. Wicasa hesitated, the thought of danger tightening his chest, but Awee's frail face pushed him to agree. Laura promised a newspaper story if he succeeded, offering a sliver of hope. As he stepped into the cold night, Wicasa felt the weight of her trust, a fragile thread pulling him toward action. Back at the tent, Wicasa found Awee asleep, her shallow breaths a painful reminder of time slipping away. He knelt beside her, counting their coins, each one a mocking reminder of the medicine he couldn't buy. His heart sank. Apologizing to Holt seemed the only way to keep her safe. He scribbled a short letter of apology, his hand trembling with shame. Gazing at Awee's pale face, he whispered, "This is for you." The thought of bowing to Holt churned his stomach, but he saw no other path. Wicasa stood resolve, hardening, and left the tent, the dawn light harsh against his weary eyes, carrying him toward a choice that felt like betrayal. The caravan gathered in a clearing, Holt seated like a king among the merchants, his arm in a sling. Wicasa stood before them, his voice shaking as he read his apology, each word a stone in his throat. Holt smirked, demanding he kneel, but Wicasa's eyes blazed, refusing to bend further. A Crow onlooker shook his head, muttering disdain, and Wicasa's chest tightened with shame. Logan clapped mockingly, his laughter a knife twisting in Wicasa's pride. Holt declared forgiveness but ordered Wicasa to leave the valley, his voice dripping with triumph. Wicasa walked away, the crowd's jeers echoing his heart, a storm of humiliation and defiance, vowing silently to fight back. Holt's caravan rolled out, leaving Wicasa in the dust, his steps heavy as he returned to the tent. Awee's coughs greeted him sharper now, and his stomach dropped at the sight of her sunken cheeks. He checked their money pouch, finding it nearly empty, the reality crushing his hopes for medicine. Awee stirred, her voice weak but sharp, accusing him of shaming them by groveling to Holt. Wicasa tried to explain his words, faltering, but she turned away, her silence a wall between them. He sank to the floor, feeling utterly powerless, as if the world had turned against him. A sudden gust blew a strange leaf into the tent, its odd shape catching his eye, stirring a flicker of curiosity. Awee woke, her eyes burning, as she demanded why Wicasa had apologized to Holt. "You've shamed us," she whispered, her words cutting deeper than any blade. Wicasa explained. Holt's threat to jail them, his voice thick with guilt, but Awee's anger held firm, saying she'd rather die than see him bow. He knelt, begging her forgiveness, promising to make things right. Her coughs interrupted, each one a stab to his heart, and she turned away, too weak to argue. Wicasa's eyes stung with unshed tears as he stepped outside, the weight of her disappointment suffocating. Driven by a desperate need to act, he resolved to uncover Holt's secrets, no matter the cost. Wicasa sought out Taza, an old friend from the Crow village, his voice urgent as he shared Holt's threats. Taza listened, his face guarded, saying the tribe was split over Wicasa's ties to the whites. Wicasa pleaded for help to rally others, but Taza hesitated, warning that trust was scarce. "I'll try," Taza said, his doubt clear, offering only a faint hope. Wicasa's heart sank. The rejection familiar, but no less painful, he left, realizing he needed hard proof to win the tribe's support. The village's cold stares followed him, but Awee's frail form in his mind pushed him forward, determined to fight alone if he must. Wicasa picked up the strange leaf, its jagged edges, unlike any in the valley, his fingers tracing its outline. He recalled seeing one like it near Holt's tent, a memory that quickened his pulse. Thoughts of the mysterious People's Guide, a shadowy figure from tribal tales, flickered in his mind. He decided to return to Holt's camp, the risk outweighed by his need for answers. Under cover of night, he slipped through the valley, avoiding crow eyes that might judge him. A rustling in the bushes made him pause, his heart racing as he sensed someone watching. A cloaked figure darted past, leaving Wicasa gripping his knife, resolve steeled for what lay ahead. In the dead of night, Wicasa crept into Holt's deserted camp, the silence heavy with danger. He found a locked chest by Holt's tent, its iron clasp gleaming faintly. With his knife he pried it open, heart pounding as the lock snapped. Inside lay letters and a map outlining a plan to clear Crowland for a lumber mill. His eyes caught the name Pierce, a federal officer, and dread settled in his gut. Wicasa stuffed the papers inside his jacket, adrenaline surging as he slipped away. Logan's shadow loomed nearby, forcing Wicasa to dive behind a crate, barely escaping. He fled into the dark, the documents burning against his chest, a dangerous truth now in his hands. Safe in his tent, Wicasa pored over the stolen papers by flickering lamplight, each word a revelation of betrayal. The plan detailed cutting down sacred crow forests, poisoning rivers to force the tribe out. Holt and Pierce's signatures sealed the scheme. Their greed laid bare. Wicasa's hands shook the scale of their cruelty, overwhelming a direct attack on his people's soul. He thought of Awee, her life tied to this land, and resolve hardened in his chest. He hid the papers under a floorboard, knowing they could change everything. With dawn approaching, he set out for Laura, the weight of this secret both a burden and a weapon. At the inn, Wicasa handed Laura the papers, his voice low but fierce as he explained their contents. Laura's eyes widened, scanning the map and letters, her shock mirroring his own. She vowed to send them to a major newspaper, her words igniting hope in Wicasa's weary heart, but she warned him of the danger, saying Holt's men would hunt him. Wicasa nodded, thinking of Awee's coughs, ready to risk all for her. Laura suggested they work together, her trust, a rare warmth in his lonely fight. They planned to expose Holt's plot, and as Wicasa left, the paper's weight lifted slightly, replaced by a burning need to see justice done. Laura's footsteps echoed as she left the inn, but a chill ran down her spine when she noticed a shadow trailing her. Logan Holt's brutal assistant had spotted her with Wicasa, his eyes glinting with suspicion. He reported to Holt, who ordered him to track her every move. His voice cold with menace. Laura's heart raced as she sensed the danger, her hands trembling as she penned a warning to Wicasa, slipping it to a courier. Later, Logan broke into her room, tossing papers and clothes in a frantic search for the stolen documents. Laura returned to find the chaos, her breath catching at the violation, fear gripping her. She packed quickly, deciding to hide in a new lodging, her resolve to expose Holt now laced with dread. Wicasa stood in the village square, his voice hoarse, as he shared Holt's plan to destroy Crowland. The gathered crow scoffed, a young man shouting, "You're lying to save yourself." Others muttered he was a traitor, their words stinging like thorns. Wicasa's chest tightened, but he pressed on, describing the poisoned rivers. They turned away, leaving him alone in the dust, rejection cutting deep. He sought Hastian, pleading for trust, but the elder demanded proof, his stern gaze unyielding. Wicasa left the weight of their doubt crushing, yet Awee's frail form in his mind fueled his determination to keep fighting. Logan's boots crunched on the path as he ambushed Wicasa, his knife flashing under the moon hand over the papers. "Or your sister's dead," he snarled. Wicasa's heart pounded, but he feigned ignorance, dodging as Logan swung. A Crow villager's shout interrupted, forcing Logan to retreat, but not before his fist grazed Wicasa's shoulder, pain flaring. Wicasa stumbled away, blood seeping through his shirt, fear for Awee choking him. He pictured her alone, vulnerable to Logan's wrath, and his stomach twisted, vowing to protect her. Wicasa decided to move her to safety, his steps quickening despite the ache, driven by a desperate need to outrun the danger. Wicasa led Awee through the dark forest, her frail body leaning on him as they reached a hidden cave. He spread a blanket and set out water, his hands gentle but shaking with worry. Awee protested, her voice weak, saying she didn't want to hide like a coward. Wicasa knelt, explaining it was to keep her safe from Holt's men, his eyes pleading. She relented, but her coughs echoed in the damp air, each one a stab to his heart. He asked a trusted friend to guard her, his voice thick with gratitude. Leaving the cave, Wicasa felt her fear clinging to him, the weight of her survival pressing harder, urging him to act before it was too late. Logan's shadow loomed again, his knife gleaming as he cornered Wicasa on a narrow trail. "Last chance, Crow," he growled, demanding the documents. Wicasa fought back his fists, landing a blow that bloodied Logan's nose. A sudden arrow whistled from the dark piercing Logan's leg, and he fled, cursing. Wicasa spun, catching a glimpse of a cloaked figure, the people's guide vanishing into the trees. His heart raced relief mixing with suspicion as he wondered who saved him. He called out, but only silence answered the encounter, leaving him shaken, yet determined to follow the trail of secrets. Under a gnarled oak, Wicasa found a folded paper, its edges pinned by a familiar jagged leaf. The note read, "Find Pierce's document cache," in a hurried scrawl, sending a jolt through him. Another leaf, identical to those from Holt's tent, lay beside it, tying the clues to the people's guide. Wicasa's mind churned, questioning if this was aid or a trap. He tucked the note away, fear of Logan's return sharpening his senses. The promise of more evidence sparked hope, but the danger loomed large. Wicasa gripped his knife resolve, hardening as he vowed to uncover the truth. The note, a beacon in the dark. Alone in his tent, Wicasa sat by a flickering lamp, the note's words looping in his mind. Was the people's guide a friend or a manipulator weaving a snare? He recalled old crow tales of spirits guiding the lost, but doubt gnawed at him. He checked the stolen papers, their damning words fueling his suspicion of a setup. Wicasa decided to keep the clue secret, trusting no one until he knew more. He prepared to search for Pierce's cache, his heart heavy with the risk. A distant wolf's howl sent a shiver down his spine, mirroring the uncertainty that clung to him like a shadow. Wicasa returned to the cave, his breath catching as he saw Awee, her face, pale blood staining her lips. She could barely sit, her voice a whisper as she blamed him for provoking Holt. "I'll fix this," he promised, his voice cracking, though despair clawed at him. He offered her water, his hands trembling as her coughs grew worse. Awee gripped his hand, confessing her fear of dying in a cell, her words a dagger in his chest. Wicasa swore to keep her free, his eyes burning with unshed tears. He stayed until she slept, her fragile form etching itself into his resolve to fight on. Wicasa sat beside Awee in the cave, the damp air thick with her labored breaths. He spoke of Holt's plan to poison their rivers, his voice steady despite the ache in his heart. Awee's eyes softened, and she whispered an apology for her harsh words, her regret a balm to his wounds. He held her close, feeling a flicker of hope as their bond mended. "I'll protect you," he vowed, his words fierce with love. Awee drifted to sleep, her hand in his, and Wicasa wiped away tears, the moment grounding him. He stepped outside the night's chill, sharpening his focus, ready to face the fight ahead. Logan's boots thudded as he broke into Laura's new hideout, his hands binding her wrists as he dragged her to an abandoned warehouse. Holt loomed over her, demanding the stolen papers, his voice a low growl. Laura defied him, saying, "The truth will come out," her courage unshaken despite her fear. Holt's eyes narrowed. Threatening her life if Wicasa didn't comply, Logan sent a message to Wicasa through a crow runner, the words, "a chilling ultimatum." Laura struggled against her ropes, her mind racing for escape, but guards blocked every path. In the dim warehouse, her heart pounded, clinging to hope that Wicasa would find her. A crow runner slipped through the trees, pressing Logan's message into Wicasa's hand. The words, chilling, "deliver the documents or Laura dies." Wicasa's heart sank, guilt flooding him for dragging Laura into his fight. He read the note again, its threat coiling around his thoughts like a snake. Handing over the papers would protect Laura, but doom the crow's land. His mind raced, picturing Awee's frail form and Laura's courage, both now at risk. Wicasa chose to save Laura first, his chest tight with resolve. He planned a raid on the warehouse, sketching its layout in the dirt. Kneeling in the forest, he prayed for Awee's safety, the weight of his choices heavier than ever. Wicasa gathered crude weapons, sharpened sticks, and a rusty knife, his hand steady despite the fear gnawing at him. He drew a rough map of the warehouse based on the runner's description, each line fueling his determination. He sought Taza's help, but his friend shook his head, fear of Holt's men holding him back. Wicasa nodded, accepting. He'd go alone, his solitude a familiar ache. He hid the stolen documents deeper in the cave, ensuring Awee's guardian knew their value. He wrote a letter for Awee, words of love, in case he didn't return. With dawn breaking, Wicasa set out the warehouse, looming in his mind like a fortress. In the village square, Wicasa's voice echoed, holding up the stolen papers to a skeptical crowd. "Holt plans to poison our rivers," he shouted. But jeers answered, calling him a liar, desperate for redemption. His heart pounded as he described the lumber mill scheme, urging them to check the polluted streams. The crowd wavered, some spitting at his feet. Their distrust, a knife in his gut. Hastian rose, silencing the murmurs, demanding they listen. Wicasa's plea ended with a call to verify the water, and a few nodded, wary but curious. The meeting dissolved in tension, but Wicasa felt a spark of hope clinging to the chance his people might rally. Hastian led a small group to the river Wicasa at his side, their boots sinking into the muddy bank. They found dead fish floating the water, reeking of chemicals, and Hastian's face hardened. He turned to the group, declaring, Wicasa's claims true, his voice carrying the weight of years. The men murmured, anger rising as they recognized the poison's source. Hastian called for unity against Holt, and most agreed their resolve, a balm to Wicasa's weary heart. He was named leader of their probe, a responsibility that steadied him. Wicasa's thoughts flickered to Laura trapped, and he vowed to free her, buoyed by the tribe's tentative trust. Wicasa's group tested the river, confirming toxins with a bitter taste, their faces grim. They traced a hidden pipe to Holt's camp, its rusted mouth spewing filth. A crow elder identified the chemicals linking them to lumber mills, his words fueling their rage. Wicasa connected the pipe to the documents, his voice fierce as he rallied the group. In a tense meeting, the tribe's anger erupted, their land's betrayal uniting them. They pledged to back Wicasa, their shouts, a surge of strength in his chest. Yet Laura's plight gnawed at him, her courage, a beacon he couldn't abandon, pushing him to act swiftly before Holt struck again. Pierce's hired guns stormed the village, their rifles cracking the dawn with warning shots. Dispersed they bellowed, but Hastian stood tall, defying them until a buttstock felled him. Wicasa's heart lurched, dragging the elder to safety as chaos erupted. Some crow fought back their fists, no match for steel, and screams filled the air. Pierce appeared, his cold eyes promising to raise the village if they resisted. Wicasa's blood boiled his vow to save Hastian and Laura, burning brighter. He rallied the survivors, their fear palpable, and led them into the forest, the attack a brutal reminder of the stakes they faced. Wicasa guided a small band through the trees, their breaths sharp in the cold. He assigned guards for the women and children, his voice calm despite the panic in his chest. Planning Laura's rescue, he sketched the warehouse again, his fingers trembling. A young crow offered to scout Holt's camp, his bravery lifting Wicasa's spirits. Thoughts of Awee alone in the cave tightened his throat, and he sent a runner to check on her. Wicasa prepared to face Logan, his knife heavy in his hand. The forest's silence felt like a held breath, urging him toward the fight that could save or doom them all. The people's guide emerged from the shadows, his cloaked form guiding Wicasa to a hidden cave. Inside, Wicasa found a cache of Pierce's documents, their pages detailing payments from Baxter, the lumber tycoon. His pulse quickened, the evidence a weapon against their enemies. The guide vanished before Wicasa could speak, leaving only the echo of his steps. Wicasa clutched the papers, their weight a promise of justice. He resolved to free Laura, her life now tied to this truth. The cave's damp air clung to him, but the guide's aid kindled hope, a faint light in the gathering storm. In a moonlit clearing, the people's guide stopped Wicasa, pulling back his hood to reveal a scarred crow face. "I worked for Pierce," he confessed, voice heavy with shame, admitting he'd aided their schemes before seeking redemption. Wicasa's shock softened to trust the man's regret, mirroring his own struggles. The guide spoke of leaving clues to atone, his eyes fierce with purpose. He promised to fight beside Wicasa, a vow that steadied him. Handing over a map to another cache, the guide urged haste. Wicasa gripped the map, his heart torn between doubt and gratitude, ready to wield this new ally's truth. Wicasa followed the map to a buried chest in a remote gully, his shovel striking wood after hours of digging. Inside, he found ledgers listing Baxter's payments to Holt and a letter signed by Ellen Holt, implicating her in the plot. His breath caught the betrayal's depth, sinking in. He realized Holt's entire family profited from Crow suffering fury rising in his chest. Wicasa hid the papers, fearing Baxter's influence over the press. He decided to deliver them to Laura himself, his steps quickening with purpose. The gully's shadows seemed to watch, but Wicasa pressed on the evidence, a burning hope against the looming fight. Wicasa slipped into town under cover of darkness, his heart pounding as he met Laura's contact at a dimly lit tavern. He handed over the new documents, his voice urgent, demanding they be published immediately. The contact, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, promised to send them to a major newspaper. His nod. A flicker of hope. Wicasa lingered, anxiety gnawing at him, praying the truth would break free. He left quietly, dodging the glow of street lamps to avoid Pierce's men. Awee's frail face haunted him, her survival tied to this gamble. A storm rolled in, thunder rumbling like a warning, mirroring the chaos swelling in his chest as he headed back to the village. The newspaper received the documents, but Baxter's shadow loomed large, his money silencing the story with a swift bribe. Laura's contact sent Wicasa a frantic letter, the words a gut punch as his plan crumbled. He clutched the note, despair threatening to drown him, the betrayal of the system cutting deep. Awee's voice echoed in his mind, urging him not to give up her strength, a spark in his darkness. Wicasa sought Laura, determined to find another way. He felt the world closing in, but his resolve hardened, refusing to let Baxter's greed win. The village's quiet felt oppressive, pushing him to act before hope faded. In the cave, Wicasa and the people's guide crept toward the warehouse, their breaths silent in the night. They distracted Logan's guards with thrown stones slipping past as shouts echoed. Wicasa found Laura, her wrists bound, and cut her free, his hand steady despite his racing heart. She whispered of Holt's threats, her voice shaky but defiant. Thanking Wicasa with a fierce nod, the guide led them through a forest path, evading pursuit, his knowledge a lifeline. Wicasa's fear for Holt's retaliation surged, but Laura's resolve bolstered him. They reached safety, the rescue a small victory, yet the fight loomed larger, demanding every ounce of their courage. Wicasa and Laura huddled in the cave, their faces lit by a flickering fire as they planned a protest at the federal headquarters. Laura scribbled a new article, her pen flying, determined to reach another paper. Wicasa urged the Crow to join, his voice firm despite the risk of attack. Laura warned of Pierce's mercenaries, her eyes sharp with concern, but Wicasa called it their last stand. They assigned tasks, rallying villagers to make banners, their shared purpose a spark in the gloom. Wicasa's thoughts drifted to Awee, her coughs, a reminder of what he fought for. The cave's walls seemed to pulse with their defiance, binding them to the coming battle. At the village square, Wicasa's voice rang out, calling the Crow to march against Holt. Hastian, bandaged but unbowed, echoed his plea, his words uniting the crowd. Villagers gathered drums and banners, their colors vivid against the dawn. Some youths hesitated, fearing arrest, but Wicasa shared the guide's sacrifice, his voice thick with emotion. The tribe agreed, their resolve a tide lifting Wicasa's spirit. They prepared to leave footsteps, firm, a shared purpose binding them. Wicasa felt their strength flow through him, a beacon against the fear of what lay ahead, his heart set on justice. Holt's spies caught wind of the protest, and he alerted Pierce, his voice dripping with scorn. Pierce hired more mercenaries, their rifles gleaming as they encircled the federal building's approach. Holt ordered Logan to lead the assault, his command a promise of violence. The mercenaries blocked the roads, their shouts chilling the air. Holt declared the Crow savages to be crushed, his hatred bare. Pierce sent Wicasa a letter via a Crow traitor threatening annihilation. Wicasa read it, his jaw tight, and burned the paper, his defiance a fire against the looming threat ready to face the storm. The People's Guide appeared leading a nervous man, a former aide to Pierce who knew every secret of the plot. The aide agreed to testify publicly, his voice trembling but resolute, offering Wicasa a powerful ally. The guide handed the man to Wicasa, his eyes fierce with trust. Wicasa planned the aide's speech, his heart racing at the chance to expose Pierce. Fear of an ambush gnawed at him, the aide's safety precarious. The guide vowed to guard him, his presence a steady anchor. Wicasa gripped the documents, their truth, a weapon, his resolve sharpened by the guide's sacrifice, ready to strike at the heart of the conspiracy. The Crow gathered before the federal building, their drums thundering as Wicasa raised the documents high. Laura read her article aloud, her voice cutting through the crowd, naming Holt and Pierce as thieves. The tribe sang ancient songs, their voices a defiant chorus that drew onlookers. Mercenaries, advanced rifles, raised their shouts, a grim warning. Wicasa called for calm, his heart pounding as tension crackled. The aide stepped forward, beginning his testimony, each word a blow against the plot. Wicasa stood tall, the crowd's strength behind him, the moment a crucible where their fate would be forged. Awee, frail and pale, was carried to the protest, her presence. A quiet fire among the crowd, she stood beside Wicasa, her voice weak but clear, speaking of her dream to save their land. The tribe's songs grew louder, her words igniting their hearts, a shared love for their home. Wicasa held her hand, feeling her life slipping, his throat tight with grief. Awee smiled, whispering she was proud, her eyes bright with love. She collapsed, and Wicasa's cry tore through the air, raw with loss. The crowd's resolve hardened her sacrifice, a spark that fueled their stand, binding them in shared sorrow. Holt and Baxter were seized by federal officers, their crimes laid bare by the aide's testimony and Laura's article. The Crow's land was declared untouchable. A victory sealed in law, the conspiracy unraveled justice, a hard-won light after darkness. Wicasa mourned Awee her absence, a wound that would never heal. Yet the tribe's respect steadied him. The sacrifices of Awee and the guide echoed, inspiring the Crow to stand taller. Laura's stories spread their tale, a testament to their fight. Wicasa stood on the valley's edge, the wind carrying their legacy, a vow to honor their land forever.